Welcome back, Geico Outkick Studios. We're joined now by my Fox Bet Live co-host, formerly called Lock It In, Todd Furhman, at Todd Furhman on Twitter. As you break down everything going on in the universe of college football in the NFL, Furhman, would you say that the September and October we've had so far, obviously it's an abnormal September and October, but would you say it's more strange than you anticipated in the COVID era? Or would you say it's almost exactly what you've anticipated from a football perspective?
I don't think anybody could have anticipated what it's been to try and go through and figure out which games are going to get played, which games are going to get canceled. And don't think for a second I'm crying over spilled milk, because at the end of March and early April, you'd have killed for football in any capacity. And if they said, hey, look, there's a chance 10 games are going to be played every weekend, but 9 of those 10 are going to be canceled, you're still going to sign on that dotted line. But there is no doubt, as a handicapper, it has completely changed the process. I do a lot less betting early in the week with college football, and this week the perfect illustration. The game that we gave out as a best bet as our weekly Outkick column ends up getting canceled between Tulsa and Cincinnati. So somewhere along the way, it becomes an exercise in futility. But knowing that I don't have any other better ways to spend my time, I'm going to continue to bang my head into the wall until things change.
All right, so let's start in the NFL. We have got an absolute monster game that, if anything, I think is actually a little bit underplayed, maybe because there's just so many crazy stories out there in the world of sports right now. But the Packers are going on the road against the Bucs. The last time we saw Tom Brady, he was holding up 4 fingers and furious over the way that the game ended against the Bears. I can't wait to watch this game. I think it's going to be incredible. How would you break it down?
I think there's a number of interesting factors here. You have a well-rested Green Bay Packers team, and Aaron Rodgers was plenty outspoken about his inability to leave Green Bay during their bye week, given some of those COVID protocols. So for a student of the game like him and what we've seen from Matt LaFleur, you have to imagine those two are going to whip up a few unique wrinkles that'll be on full display. Meanwhile, you mentioned Tom Brady, and the lasting image we saw of that loss on Thursday Night Football last week against the Bears was him losing track of what down and distance it was late in that game. So now he'll be with the weapons at his disposal. We know O.J. Howard lost for the season, but expect Chris Godwin to be out there. We're seeing him build a relationship with Mike Evans, who should be a little bit healthier dealing with that lower body injury. And without Vita Vea on the defensive line for Tampa, I'm not sure where the stops come from in this particular game. And it's rare that I'll advocate for going over it with such a public total, but I really feel it's going to take at least 35 points for one of these teams to come out of Raymond James Stadium with a victory.
So I'm on the over, right? I like the over, but I also I feel as if the Bucs lose this game, that this is one of those big statement games in terms of its overall impact, that it's going to be hard for the Bucs in the NFC South, and also that we'll start to ask a lot of questions about the Bucs going forward. Now, I know that historically Brady has been a slow starter and they get white hot into November and December and all those things. But would you be like, if they lose this game, this is a little bit of an alarm button, or were you more alarmed by the performance against the Bears? And if you lose to the Packers, they may be the best team in the NFC this year, so it's hard to get too worked up.
I don't think it's an alarm button, because Green Bay has exceeded expectations early on. This was a team who I thought was poised to regress this year, but forgetting how valuable Aaron Rodgers can be, even dealing with some of those secondary receivers. But there's no doubt the Bucs need that big confidence-building win, and this gives them the perfect opportunity to try and go out there and do it against the Green Bay defense that, in my opinion, has underachieved. The offense has been a lot better, but the defense has actually been the unit that's regressed, whether it's missed tackles, whether it's their inability to get off the field in the red zone. And we haven't seen Green Bay's run defense really tested either, because they've played with elite. Suddenly the Bucs have a bona fide number one running back in Ronald Jones, who should be able to run against this Packers defensive front. And if you're making a case for the side, there's no doubt, in my opinion, that Tampa doesn't deserve to be an underdog in this game, and that's the only way for me to look.
All right, so Browns-Steelers. I know that I like to make fun of you on Fox Bet Live by saying that you're like you're a hipster sports gambling fan, right? Like you like the band until they become popular, and then you decide that they sold out and you can't support them any longer. You liked the Browns when nobody liked the Browns. Last year you were anti the Browns because they got too popular for you. This year early you've been back on the Browns. They're on the road against the Steelers. How do you break this one down? Steelers haven't been 4-0 in 41 years. Browns haven't been 4-1 in a very, very long time. One team's going to be 5-0. The other one's going to be 5-1. What happens?
Yeah, I'm a much bigger fan of a band playing in a small pub in Liverpool than when they're opening up Wembley Stadium. Let's not kid ourselves.
That's exactly right.
But I think when you look at this Cleveland Browns team, they've gone about doing the things you need to do to be successful in the National Football League. So much is made about running backs and wide receivers and the quarterback, but until you have the building blocks on your offensive and defensive lines, it's impossible to win at this level. And Cleveland addressed that this offseason, bringing in Jack Conklin from your beloved Titans, and it's really paid dividends as we've seen a running back by committee, whether it was Nick Chubb before he was injured or Dearness Johnson against the Cowboys and Kareem Hunt, having a ton of success. But this will be their biggest test. And when I look at the Steelers team defensively, I think they're a little bit overrated, especially in their secondary. They haven't faced an offense that has a pulse either to this point in the season. You mentioned how infrequently the Browns have had to deal with prosperity. Well, they've won 4 out of 5 games for only the second time in the last 40 years. This would be their first 5-game winning streak since 1994 if they're able to pull it off. And it's part of the reason, though, we have seen some professional money come in on the Browns. This number opened at 4.5 at FanDuel earlier in the week. Number got as low as a field goal. And I think when you look at Cleveland, the only concern you have is how healthy is Baker Mayfield. His x-rays on his ribs came back negative, so you think he'll be fine and good to go. I think Cleveland is able to make enough plays in this game to keep it competitive. But honestly, when I look at the handicap overall, the number's tight. I think we're going to see some points. I'd lean over 51.
All right, to me, those are the two biggest and best NFL games. Is there any other NFL game that's jumping out at you that you just think is a compelling storyline from a gambling perspective?
I do, and it's the one right in your backyard, actually, with the Titans about a...
You're a hater on the Titans, yes. Well, I can bet already where this is going to go.
Yeah, you know where this is going before it comes out of my mouth. But when you look at this particular spot, when we talk about short weeks in the NFL, the Titans are in an unenviable territory here. They had to play on a Tuesday night. Houston played on Sunday. And while we talk about Thursday night football, typically when we see those games, both teams had to play on Sunday. That felt like a performance for me for the Titans against the Bills, that it was us against the world. We need to show everyone that we're not going to use COVID as an excuse to come out here with a flat performance against an undefeated Bills side. Now you get that collective exhale. You get a division opponent who has underachieved all season long coming into your building, and despite Romeo Crennel's 30% track record or whatever it is as a head coach, I think the Houston Texans know their season is hanging in the balance, and as the number trends towards 3.5, the only way for me to look is the road underdog. I think we see a complete effort from Houston. We see the Titans a little bit flat, and would not be shocked at all if we don't have to see that ugly Hawaiian shirt come Monday on Fox Bet Live.
We were talking with Todd Furhman. All right, let's go to college football. And one of the biggest debates that you and I, for instance, have, and not a debate like where we're going back and forth like it's a presidential debate yelling at each other, but it's an interesting bar debate, I would say, a fan debate, certainly for gamblers out there. It's been, what is a coach worth on the sideline to his team from a performance perspective? And we actually got an unbelievable test of this with Nick Saban now testing positive for COVID. Fortunately, he's healthy. He doesn't seem to be symptomatic in any way, but he's not going to be able to be on the sideline. And the line moved from Alabama as a 6-point favorite over Georgia all the way to Alabama now as just a 3.5-point favorite. 2.5-point line move, given some of those numbers, pretty significant. It didn't get down to 3. It certainly didn't break the number. But this is an interesting sort of study on the value of a top coach, isn't it?
Yeah, because when you consider Alabama, if they were to lose Najee Harris for this game, or they were have to play without Jalen Waddle or Devontae Smith, none of that trio of players, if it was just one of them that were going to miss the game, would move the number as much as what we're seeing for Nick Saban's absence on the sideline. So when you look at a game of this magnitude, we know that Nick has really dominated his former assistants. Kirby Smart hasn't been able to get over the hump against Alabama. And when we look at this Georgia team and you trust the 24/7 composite index, Georgia's more talented on paper in terms of their ratio of 5-star recruits. So if it's not going to happen now, then when? But I also think in a one-game sample size, everybody else raises their level of play, whether it's Mac Jones under center or you're going to get Steve Sarkisian calling a tremendous offensive game plan, the change that Alabama went through on the defensive side as well. At 4, with only Nick Saban really changing in this game, I think the only way to look is at Alabama, whereas earlier in the week I was much more compelled to try and back Georgia if the number got out to 7. But this will be a fascinating game, one that I know I'll be glued to the edge of my seat to try and watch, especially having a futures ticket on Georgia, hoping that they can get an inside track to the college football playoff. But at the same time, win or lose, I don't think it's really going to tell us a whole heck of a lot about two teams that we really believe are clear-cut in the top four alongside Clemson and Ohio State, that even with one loss, I think both these teams will be in the college football playoff.
We're talking to Todd Furhman. You can follow him on Twitter at Todd Furhman. You can see him every single afternoon, including this afternoon, alongside of me at 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central, 3 o'clock Mountain, 2 o'clock Pacific on FS1 as we break down a lot of college football and NFL games rolling into the weekend. You mentioned something that I think is pretty intriguing there, the 24/7 composite index, where you can go look at the overall amount of talent that teams have. I've been on this argument train for a long time, which is, if anything, the amount of sheer talent and importance in college football of signing day is underrated, because really, if you want to contend for a championship, you positively have to recruit a lot of 4- and 5-star guys. Alabama, Ohio State, and Georgia are on a different level than every other team in the country if you look at that composite index of overall talent.
For sure. Just don't tell that to any Texas Longhorns fans, because they consistently rank in the top 10 and underachieve every single season. But there's no doubt that it starts on the recruiting trail, and that's why a lot of the top-tier programs spend millions and millions of dollars to try and make sure that they're able to identify guys that'll fit their system. And it's not to negate the coaching impact that it has overall once you get these guys to campus, but you're not going to take that one-star recruit and turn him into a 5-star to compete week in, week out. And as we see, especially in the SEC, where it's a war of attrition, you need that next man up. So while a Boise State out there can get a couple of big-time recruits, what does the depth and the fall-off look like? And you've seen that in the Pac-12 and a lot of the other second-tier programs that are out there. So when you get the big boys going up, it's nice to have that luxury when you're Georgia, that you have 9 defensive linemen you can cycle through the game, and that if you lose a top-tier cornerback, hey, look, I got another guy I can plug right in there. And I think when you see the shifting in the balance of power towards Kirby Smart in Georgia from where it was with Alabama and even Clemson, this is why the Blue Bloods continue to remain atop the heap, and it's rare exceptions that you'll see a team from outside that top 6 or 8 that can crash the party and get into the college football playoff.
Todd Furhman, fantastic stuff as always. I will see you later this afternoon on television. Thanks for hopping on with us early this morning, and I hope you're wrong about many of the bets that you have made here, particularly the Titans.
Hey, always a pleasure. Look forward to chatting this afternoon. Enjoy the games this weekend, Clay.